Welcome back to Raw Politics. Now, pressure is piling on Saudi Arabia to provide answers about the disappearance of reporter and Saudi dissident Jamal Khashoggi. Images released by Turkish authorities show an alleged 15-man Saudi hit team arriving in Istanbul on 2 private planes on the day Khashoggi was last seen entering the Saudi consulate there. Now, Khashoggi is a Washington Post reporter and an outspoken critic of the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, National Security Advisor John Bolton, and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo have spoken to the Crown Prince about Khashoggi. Saudi leaders deny all involvement in the journalist's disappearance. All right, at the noon briefing today, Commission officials would not say if they would impose sanctions if Saudi authorities are proven to be behind the disappearance, and they refuse to give details on the nature of the communications with the Saudi kingdom. Euronews reporter Shona Murray was there.
You said that you're monitoring the situation, but has the Commission actually been in touch with the Saudi authorities demanding an investigation from the Commission, or what kind of interaction has there been?
As I said, there are many contacts that are ongoing, including with Saudi authorities, and we have passed this message very clearly, not just publicly, but also in direct contact.
All right, well, with me in the studio with more on this, we have our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, Valentina Pop from the Wall Street Journal, and Mohammed Shaban, a reporter from the Euronews Arabic service. Mohammed, I'll start with you. You've been covering the region and this story quite closely. I'd like to talk about how brazen this whole act is. I mean, are you surprised by just how openly this was done?
Well, it's really surprising regarding the facts that we have only one fact since the beginning, that we have a citizen, I would like to call him a citizen, entered his consulate for some procedures. He didn't get out. So since the beginning, we have the only fact.
Right, Saudi Arabia obviously denies involvement, but the fact that this happened in broad daylight, what does this say? The fact that it's so brazen.
Well, I believe we are all stuck in the potentials on what happened, what may happen to this journalist, to this citizen, since the very beginning. And so far, there are some leaks here and there. We hear some resources, like any other big event. But so far, we have this only fact. We are talking about, let's put it like this. We have the 2 parts here in this issue. We have the Saudi Arabia, we have the Turkey, who are not they are not along together since a while. They are not, there's no kind of accord between both of them since a while. And it seems like everybody met now. They have transferred it. They have changed it into a political issue.
I think what's also interesting, when you look at Saudi Arabia, you have the Crown Prince who's trying to present a different face, right? And then you see something like this happening.
But we are dealing with facts, right?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, the fact is that the man didn't come out of the consulate anymore. Somewhere he has disappeared. And also our paper has corroborated some of the claims that the Turkish authorities have made about all these flights from Saudi Arabia coming to Turkey with alleged hitmen. We don't know if the men were actual hitmen, but we could corroborate the actual flights that did land in Turkey, as the Turkish authorities said. Now, from there to say, they killed the man and dismembered him, I mean, that's an allegation that nobody can really substantiate and prove. And also, we must remind ourselves that Turkey itself is not exactly a journalist freedom paragon, as it has 250 journalists in jail at the moment.
I think what's interesting here is the change in tone in the way that political leaders were reacting, because they've been lining up now to seek answers from Saudi authorities. At first, the U.S. response was cautious, but yesterday that tone changed slightly.
This is a bad situation. We cannot let this happen. To reporters, to anybody, we can't let this happen. And we're going to get to the bottom of it, okay?
Well, it's despicable, and the whole world is watching. The Crown Prince is portraying himself as a reformer who's trying to improve and open up Saudi society. Reformers don't kill their political opponents.
My feelings are that probably he's been murdered.
All right, are we seeing cracks, Darren, in the US-Saudi relationship?
I think we are to a degree, but it is interesting that Donald Trump went on to say that whether there should be sanctions. He said, I think that would be hurting us. We have jobs. We have a lot of things happening in this country. We have a country that's probably doing economically better than ever before. In essence, Trump still views this as Saudi Arabia have given us lots of defence deals. We're getting money from that. That's protecting American jobs. That's my primary mission, not necessarily to properly scrutinise what Saudi Arabia are doing. He has clearly come under some domestic pressure. And we've also heard European leaders like the British Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt has talked about how he's worried about these allegations. Again, a very strong ally of Saudi Arabia. But in essence, many people are pointing out, you look at Russia with the Skripal case in Salisbury, you look what China have done with the head of Interpol, and potentially Saudi Arabia with this case in Istanbul. And people are starting to say, essentially, our authoritarian regimes now pretty brazen because the international community have been unable to properly deal with these incidents.
And everyone seems to be walking on eggshells around there. I think are they well aware of this reaction that people are walking on eggshells around them because of economic ties or...
Exactly. We're talking about the number 2 importer of arms in the world, it's Saudi Arabia. So we are talking about benefits here. And at the same time, we are talking about the differences between Saudi Arabia and Turkey. Every part wants to put a goal. Let's put it like this, really. And why, for example, why the Turkish authorities, for example, are leaking step by step? It's like a kind of pressure, indirect pressure. Okay, the first day we saw a still photo, showing that Mr. Khashoggi about to enter the consulate, the building. The second day we are talking about videos. We are talking about allegedly 15 persons.
You've got to ask about motivation as well. Why
exactly.
Yeah.
So it became
well, to be fair, I mean, Erdogan is also demanding answers.
He's in a tough position as well.
It has happened in his country.
Exactly.
I think it's understandable.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Turkey, as we were talking about, has been releasing what it says is evidence of a Saudi plot. And on social media, citizen journalists have been working to confirm or disprove that information. And with more on that side of the story, I'm joined by Alex Morgan and our team in Lyon, The Cube, our social media news desk. Alex.
Hey, Tessa. Yeah, just listening to your discussion there, all this information people are sifting through, and it's feeding into what is called open source intelligence. Now, that's a graphic to represent something that's not a new idea by any means. This is perhaps the best I could come up with here. The idea is that information that's publicly available is brought together and analysed, open source intelligence. Now, that's different from classified intelligence. Traditionally, this was the preserve of intelligence officers and governments who would look through information like transport timetables, news reports, photographs and other information in the public domain for insight into a story, a mystery, a case, a crime, that kind of thing. Well, of course, in 2018, in today's modern era, the era of the internet, no longer is this the preserve only of intelligence officers, but all of us, individual people, able to use the internet, smartphones, social media to find, sift, analyse, share and discuss information separate from the narratives and indeed the information given out by governments. It's citizen journalists, ordinary people, putting themselves at the heart of this investigation. Now, I think perhaps the best example of the crossover between professional journalists and citizen journalists is the work of Bellingcat. You remember they've done a lot in uncovering, as they say, the identities of the Skripal attempted assassins there, but also they rose to prominence after the downing of MH17 by what they claim is a Buk missile launcher. They did a detailed investigation. Well, they are focusing on this now. They're saying Turkish officials have pledged that they'll be giving more evidence. So the open call from Bellingcat's chief researcher here saying, well, what can the hashtag here, OSINT, the open source intelligence community, what can you come up with? And then people didn't disappoint, sharing a lot of information with them. I just want to perhaps show you some of the work they're doing. For example, this. So this is an image that was being shared on WhatsApp. It's later been released by media in Turkey, and they used Google Maps, that is open source, public information, to identify this as the street outside the consulate, identifying key features here and comparing them with the images released there. So this is the kind of example of information that is in the public domain that ordinary people can pick up on and share that helps to give us an idea of what is really going on. Indeed, there's further discussion on these long threads on both Twitter and other social networks about exactly what could have happened to Khashoggi. But this is an example of how ordinary people are taking it into their own hands, dissecting, discussing, analysing, and that is separate from the official lines we're getting, or in some cases not getting, from national governments, Tessa.
All right, thank you for that, Alex and the Cube team. Valentina, you were talking about, this is Turkey. It's not exactly the beacon of journalistic freedom and free flow of information. Do you find as a journalist you're also having to rely a lot on what's out there from citizen journalism, especially on stories like this one?
I think they are doing a tremendous job, particularly the team at Bellingcat, I think, has proven to have gotten to the bottom of disinformation and propaganda coming from Russian trolls and so on, but also in identifying real identities or in triangulating the data on a picture to say this is a fake picture or this is a real picture. But all these answers that we can get on corroborating details about his disappearance still doesn't answer the big question of what has happened to Mr. Khashoggi. So
yeah, all it proves in some regards is that he has disappeared.
No,
absolutely.
This is the only fact we have. This is the only fact we have so far. And let's say, what about the Turkish photos, for example? Where are the Turkish videos, for example? Why we can't see it? Why they have leaked just partially? Some of them like arriving to the airport. This are all far, and there's this kind of details that let us think more and more in more details.
More questions to ask.
Exactly. But
Absolutely.
Where are the photos? What about saying like the Saudi Arabia authorities saying, okay, our CCTV didn't register that moment, or they don't register.
But then also, why have Saudi Arabia not agreed to let the Turkish authorities into the consulates so someone can do an investigation? I don't know. We're going to have to see where this goes.
I think the story is far from over, and we're going to be watching it really very closely. All right, a lot more coming up.